Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the New England Sports Weekly podcast. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you've decided to join me this evening. If you're watching the live stream here on YouTube, or if you're listening on your walk, out on your workout, or if you're in the car, wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify or SoundCloud or anywhere else to grab the podcast in the podcast version of the show. Well, it was a full week of Patriots football, the Red Sox. It was a busy week in sports. We'll definitely dive into that. And it is definitely starting to feel like fall, folks. Summer's starting to feel like it is over. Trust me, in my summer league games here, it's getting chilly in some of those night games there. It is definitely the summertime fun is almost over, although I am going to be on vacation next week. Don't worry, I'll still have a show here for you. But it'll be that last summer hurrahs. We'll have some family over and enjoy that time. But as he said, it was a busy week for football, as it was the opening week for the NFL, as it was back, baby. And the New England Patriots took on the Miami Dolphins, and they lost a heartbreaker to the Dolphins in a agonizing fashion as Damian Harris fumbled away in the red zone what they would have gotten at worst the field goal out of that possession. And they looked like they were going to march in for a touchdown to make it a 6-point game at that point. But the Patriots were not able to hold the Dolphins on their last drive as the Dolphins killed the clock, and the Patriots lost 17-16 at home in week one. They'll try to turn things around here as they will face the New York Jets down in East Rutherford, New Jersey at MetLife Stadium on their first road game of the year. And of course, the Boston Red Sox are still fighting for a wild card spot as they have taken 2 out of 3 versus the Seattle Mariners, as he was, as the Red Sox were trying to fight for those 2 wild card spots as they've been jostling back and forth with Toronto, who's hot as a firecracker right now, in the New York Yankees, who at one point in time looked like they were going to be the team that beat in the wild card race. And then all of a sudden they just hit the skids hard, just kind of like the Red Sox did after the trade deadline. So the Red Sox are hanging in there. They get a gift of facing the god-awful Baltimore Orioles this weekend. And then they'll take on the Mets this week. And then they end their week with a series against the Yankees. So we'll talk more about that Yankee series as we get into next Wednesday for you. Break that down. But the Red Sox still holding on to a wild card spot. And Chris Sale was just activated today off of the COVID IL list. He had to stay on there for 10 days after he came down positive. But they'll get their big ace back in Chris Sale for this. I mean, this is a tune-up game, really, for Chris Sale to make sure that he's ready to go, probably against New York this coming weekend. But that's big news for the Red Sox as they they have 14 games left as they're pushing towards the playoffs. And in other news for the Boston sports scene, as we just talked about with the Patriots, there have been a few injuries that have kind of come up here for the Patriots, as Trent Brown had to leave that game on Sunday as he's dealing with a quad injury, I believe, for him. So things haven't been exactly smooth for that offensive line, who kind of, after he left, didn't look the dominant offensive line that we thought. And Jonnu Smith, who was one of the biggest offseason acquisitions along with Matthew Judon and Hunter Henry, he is questionable with a hip going into this weekend against the Jets. Now, Jonnu Smith did participate today in the Friday practice. So maybe not as big of an injury as we thought as far as Jonnu Smith is concerned. So, but still, he was on the injury report, and hip injuries are never a good thing, especially for a tight end with that mobility. So it'll be interesting to see game time, what it's going to be for Jonnu and the rest of the Patriots tight end group. So we'll see how things go. But as we mentioned, the New England Patriots, as that was the out of the box segment for you, brought to you by the New England Sports Podcast. no sponsors yet. We're just having a little fun with that. It's kind of like when you get out one of those new websites and they give you that test banner. So it's kind of just running it, seeing how it feels there, folks. Well, I'm sure we'll get a sponsor here anytime soon. But as we jump right into the New England Patriots, as we mentioned off the top of the show in the out of the box segment, the Patriots dropped a heartbreaker to the Miami Dolphins. Now, there were high expectations for the Patriots going into week one. Now, of course, the Dolphins and the Patriots were there are two teams that are expected to fight for a wild card spot. Now, obviously, the Dolphins were right there last year at 10-6, and the Patriots obviously didn't end as well as the Dolphins did. They were 7-9 last year, but that was with a hollowed out roster and a bad quarterback in Cam Newton, and everything else has been kind of so-so here for the Patriots. But as far as last year was concerned, but going into that week one against the Miami Dolphins, it was a lot of high expectations. There was a lot of buzz going around the team, mainly because you have your franchise quarterback now, or at least that's what we all hoped that we have in Mac Jones. That was obviously the biggest thing you were looking forward to, but all the rest of the revamped defense, how is that going to work out? How is all this going to play out on their Sunday afternoon game against the Dolphins? And right off the bat, they handed it to Damian Harris. He burst off for 35 yards, and you're like, oh boy, this line could just be a bulldozer all day long and just going to run it right down the Dolphins' throats. Payback for that week 16 game last year when they absolutely got pummeled by the Dolphins on the ground. I mean, Damian Harris ended up having a good game statistically, 100 yards on 23 carries. Everything looked pretty good. But the big news was his costly fumble at the end of the game when the Patriots were driving down the field. They were in red territory, in the red zone. They had, at worst, an opportunity to get a field goal. At worst, they were going to get a field goal and go up by 2, and you're going to have to stop Miami. But the way that things were looking, they were slicing and dicing on that last drive. Everything looked good for the Patriots, even with all the penalties that got called. They still were marching down the field, and it looked like Mac Jones and Damian Harris and the rest of that offense were just going to go in for 6 points there, get that extra point, and get your 7, get out, and then try to stop Miami from marching down the field themselves. But Damian Harris, who last year didn't have a lot of ball security issues, fumbled. And you could probably argue that maybe there's some fatigue that had set in there because he had basically been the workhorse the whole game. Not that he can't do that, but it was 23 carries, and pretty much after Ramondre Stevens had fumbled, those last 17 carries or so, not that they didn't bring James White in or anything, they brought in Brandon Bolden, but pretty much I would say there was probably a stretch of 12 of those carries that he had kind of in a row that he was the lead back. So he was huffing and puffing by the end of it. And of course, it didn't help that he got tackled and his helmet got ripped off and got shoved right back in his mouth. and he had to sit out for a play. But as far as Damian Harris and the rest of this team were concerned, they looked like it looked like they were just going to march down the rest of the field, get their 6 and get out. But he fumbled, and like I said, he looked like he was gassed. He got hit with the helmet earlier. And not that there was any concussion or anything, but he looked gassed at the end of the game. And that probably, in my opinion, that not the whole way, not the whole thing, but I would probably say maybe 20% you could blame on him being a little fatigued, maybe of getting that ball ripped out. Of course, you got to give Miami credit, because Miami last year had, I think they were third or fourth in the league in turnovers created last year. So they're a team that you knew was going to go into the game trying to rip that ball out, trying to cause havoc. And of course they did. The Patriots had 3 turnovers in that game. And like I mentioned, if you wind that back to the first quarter, Ramondre Stevens, who fumbled after he looked like he had a few decent runs there, but he had an early fumble. And of course, Belichick does not tolerate fumbles at all. Just ask Stephen Ridley. He's still benched somewhere way out in Kalamazoo or wherever the hell he is right now. But he got absolutely ripped to shreds by Belichick after he had a game with 2 fumbles. I remember that back in, I believe it was 2014, and that was pretty much the end of Stephen Ridley with the Patriots there. It was LeGarrette Blount the rest of the way. Now, I'm not saying that Ramondre Stevens is going to get the Stephen Ridley treatment, but I was a little surprised just because you traded away Sony Michel. You didn't end up bringing in like another veteran back. You liked and don't get me wrong, I liked what I saw to Ramondre in the preseason. Yes, it's a preseason. You face the 2s and the 3s, but what Ramondre was able to do during the preseason was amazing. He looked like he could be a nice complementary power back that has some speed and more quickness and the ability to catch the ball. Not going to be a stud catching the ball all the time or anything like that. But no, what I'm saying here when it comes to Ramondre Stevens is that, to me, I really, really liked what I saw from him. He in the preseason, so I thought he was going to be a nice complementary piece here. I thought they were going to keep Sony Michel so that you have a loaded stable of backs. Because let's face it, even though Damian Harris looked good last year, he hasn't played in a full season. He still is untested as far as a full NFL season of being the lead dog. And I mean, Belichick spoke highly of him. So you just kind of knew that way they were talking, he was going to be the lead back. But it was surprising that they traded Sony and didn't get anything really back for him. Just a couple of 4th round, some 5th and 6th round picks late round, but nothing really to yell home about. But it was nice to see that they put some trust in him, at least going into the season. And right away, game 1, fumbles. He F's up. And what happens to him? He gets benched for the rest of the game, doesn't see anything. So I wasn't pleased with that. Yes, I understand. I've watched the Patriots long enough that I know that Belichick is not going to do anything as far as keep a guy out there that he has no trust in. So I wasn't surprised, but honestly, it was a little disappointing just because you didn't activate JJ Taylor. Not that JJ Taylor is any great, not that he's going to be a lead back or even a good number 2, but I like his change of pace. I think he could maybe play a little bit in the slot. He's a good change of pace back, but I was just kind of surprised at the way that they handled it the rest of that game. And you're really putting a lot on Damian Harris's plate, and I think that kind of contributed to him maybe being a little fatigued and having that ball get punched out. But we've kind of lamented enough on Damian Harris, who had a good game, but fumbled it away in the worst place possible, in the worst time possible of that game. But it really was a kick in the nuts to a game that as far as offensively, the Patriots played really well as far as what you thought that they could do, or what you kind of expected. Because my expectations were more of a game management type of game plan, which it felt that way until the second half, where they had more trust in Mac Jones, where he started to kind of spread it out, not completely shotgun, not completely no huddle, but it felt like they had more confidence and they let him throw a little bit more. But it was, to me, it was a mix of game manager, but a little bit of, we'll open it up a little bit, not open the door a full way through. But they still gave Mac enough on his plate, which we'll get to here in a moment. But still, in a game that I wasn't expecting as much as I saw. Not that we're seeing like 2007 through 2017 Patriots, where in that 12-year span there, or 10-year span, where they absolutely were a dominant offensive force, where Brady marched up and down, and not even going to get into what Brady did, but you understand, it wasn't that type of Patriots offense that we saw in years past, as far as being completely the circuses in town type of offense. But when it comes to what I was expecting even a little bit more conservative of a game plan, where you're running a lot more, just mixing, having backs come in and out. But they played really well. And defensively, it was another story. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But the big story, though, we'll get to the main plate here with Mac Jones. That was the big thing that everybody was wondering. How is this going to go? What's going to happen with Mac? How is he going to look? And of course, that was my number one thing. Why wouldn't it be? I mean, Mac Jones is where this is where you're putting the franchise. You're putting the hands of the franchise. You're putting his hands on the driver's seat of this franchise, and you're just hoping that instead of him just kind of being you'll just be a steady driver. You're hoping that he can take you to some bigger heights than just some rental driver, if you want to put it in that standpoint. But honestly, obviously, you're putting all your hopes and dreams of the franchise into his hands. And obviously, right away, you know he's good. You hope he has a good season. You know he's going to have some bumps in the road. He's a rookie. All of them have him. Hell, even veterans like Rodgers and Brady and Roethlisberger and you throw Russell Wilson, throw them out there. They still make their mistakes. So it's going to happen. You're not expecting to be 100% clean and not have any mistakes, but you're hoping for the best. And to be honest, this was more than I had expected out of Mac. To be honest, quite honest, I felt really good coming out of this game as far as Mac is concerned. The outcome of the game, no story. But how Mac Jones played, I was blown away. Might be a little too out there, but I was really excited as far as what Mac Jones was able to do in this game. Mac Jones went out there after the first snap, though. I'll be honest, after the first snap, he took that in that first series. He fumbled the ball. He was backpedaling, and he threw it to a backwards pass to Jonnu Smith, who it was like an emergency. Oh shit, I got to get rid of this type of situation. And it was that was the moment where you're like, oh boy, did we hype this guy up too much? Were we all way too far, our heads above the water here, below the water? Is this going to be too much for Mac? Was it just preseason hype, and you saw that ball fumbling away, and you're like, oh god, this is going to be a long game. Mac, to Jonnu Smith's credit, he picked it up. The Patriots ended up not giving it away that time, unlike they did on the ensuing two fumbles that they had with Ramondre Stevens and Damian Harris. But Mac Jones got right back up, recovered, and after that snafu that he had, he was great for the rest of the game. The first half, they were admittedly a little bit more conservative. There's more checkdowns, more just basic, some slant routes, some button hooks, just some simple routes, some curls, just things like that. They didn't run anything too heavy there. But then once the second half came, they seemed like they opened it up more. They trusted Mac more. He threw 39 times in that game. He had a 74% completion percentage. No interceptions, one touchdown, threw for 289 yards. He looked great in his first ever start. He did not look like a deer in the headlights. Didn't look lost out there. Didn't look like a typical rookie. He seemed like a 5-year, 10-year veteran that had just signed on to this team as a free agent. Was like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. I got the playbook and I'm ready to go. And he went out there, like I said, in that second half, they opened up a little bit wide. They were able to get it into the hands of Nelson Aguilar, who, my God, listen, I know this is one game. I'm not going to go too crazy about it, but like, holy shit, you actually had an NFL receiver. And obviously, Jacoby Myers qualifies, but you know what I'm saying? It's just like Nelson Aguilar, who has speed, who's had a first round talent. It's just the hands. Those hands are not made of stone, but they might have half a hand that's made out of stone because he's a 50-50 type of guy. And I don't mean you jump up and give him 50-50 balls. I just mean he's kind of one of those guys that's 50-50. Oh, you throw a deep ball, you're going to catch it. He can sure as hell run with it once he gets it and burn his guy. But it's a matter of, well, is he going to catch this? But Nelson Aguilar went out there and he had glue on his hands, at least in week one. The rest of the season, jury's still out on him. But that was impressed. He was Mac Jones' favorite target along with Jacoby Myers in the tight ends. So he didn't really, I say Myers and Aguilar were his favorite targets, but he spread the ball out to 8 different receivers, including the running back. But he went out there and played damn good. And speaking of the running back with James White, Mac Jones threw a perfect ball down the sideline to James White on a wheel route. And he dropped it right in the bucket. That was one of the prettiest throws that I've seen in a while from a Patriots quarterback. Of course, last year there were no pretty throws. They were all hitting the dirt. But that was classic. And guys, don't take this the wrong way. Don't say I'm saying he's Brady or anything. But it just reminded me of those wheel routes Brady would throw and just drop it right into the bucket to him. He was able to do similar things there. Right as soon as James White kind of turned his head, right over the shoulders, right into the bucket, caught it for about I believe it was like a 21, 22-yard catch. It was amazing. So Mac's got the accuracy. And kind of on a note that was really interesting, if you listen to Ivan Fears and that post game, not the post game, but during this week, I think it was Tuesday, they let this, because I believe once a month they have to have the coaches speak to the media. So they had him speak with Ivan Fears, the running backs coach, who's been here for a long time. I believe he's been here since 2004. So he's coached all the Patriots running backs at this point, pretty much all of those dynasty backs, except for the very, very first couple of years. So he knows what he's talking about. And he got asked a question about James White and his quote unquote resurgence, or kind of if he's been rejuvenated type of situation. And Ivan Fears basically said he wasn't rejuvenated. He's the same James White. He's the same guy. And basically admitted that the Patriots dumbed down the offense, that they had to change this offense last year. They dumbed everything down because of Cam. He didn't obviously say Cam's name, but you kind of catch the drift that, oh yeah, James White, yeah, no, he's been the same guy. He's still the elite pass catching running back. He's still that top tier pass catching back. He's never changed. He didn't go anywhere. And that was kind of that backhanded slap to Cam Newton. That was like, all right, we had a good toy for you to use here in James White, who could get you out of some sticky situations like he has Tom, and like he probably will with Mac. We saw a little bit of that in week 1. But you didn't have a quarterback that was able to get you any passes, because the key when it comes to throwing the ball to a running back is you got to have touch. You have to have, because these aren't those. I mean, not that James White can't run a slant or anything like that, but you're not talking about a receiver in the slot or a receiver out on the outside, your X receiver, your Y receiver. This is a receiver. You're talking about a guy that's attached to your hip. Basically, he's in the backfield that are running these wheel routes, that are running some of these checkdowns. You kind of have to throw passes that aren't gunned down the field. You're asking for some passes that have a little bit of touch to them. And we all know that Cam Newton doesn't have touch. It was all or nothing on his throws. Even though we give him crap for being 10 yards short on that Hail Mary to Houston, it still was a matter that he doesn't have touch, because he would gun it in. Like on the short throws, he was just gunning that in and not having a lot of touch there. And so that would also lead to some of those throwing them into the dirt, as far as Cam did last year. So it just made me laugh that you had your running back coach, who obviously at this point in time he probably is second in line to Josh McDaniels as far as your offensive coordinator if something happens to Josh, or third in line for that after Josh. So, but because with how long he's been here, so he knows the offense like the back of his hand at this point. So it's just interesting to see that you have a guy like Ivan Fears come out and say that about this offense. So not that I'm just trashing Cam or just putting Cam down, but it also is just showing you that the Patriots are back to running what they're used to, what they love to do. This type of surgical offense where, I know people call it dink and dunk or whatever you want to call it, but they open it up when they need to, but they're also surgical from just taking, all right, you want to give us 5, you want to give us 10, you want to give us 8, whatever it is, 15 yards. Okay, yeah, maybe we're not throwing it down the field 30, 40 yards and getting these gigantic plays every other play or every third play, but we're marching it down the field, and we'll take a 14-play drive over a 3-play drive for 75 yards to get a touchdown. But they'll, as everybody calls it, you'll get you'll get those paper cuts, and eventually you're just going to end up having a million of them and bleeding to death. I know that analogy has been out there for a million years, but really that's what the Patriots love to do. And Mac Jones went right in from week number 1 and showed that, all right, I can execute this offense the way that you think I can. And he put so much faith in not just the fans, but the coaching staff and his teammates. Everybody should be confident in this guy now, because he did not falter under any of the pressure. He went out there and slinging it as far as the Patriots offense is concerned. And like I said, threw for 39 passes and had a 74% completion percentage. So it's just, he's out there. Like I said, time will tell how clutch he is. The one thing that I will kind of critique Mac on is the second to last drive the Patriots had, where they got the field goal to make it 16-17, is he had an opportunity to hit Jacoby Myers he was about 4 yards short. And if he hits him in stride instead of throwing it low and making Jacoby try to reach for it, and it went incomplete, if he hits him while he's in stride, if he gets that ball up a little bit and makes it a little bit easier of a play for Jacoby, I guarantee you Jacoby gets that 4 yards and that drive is still alive, and they probably end up getting a touchdown instead of a field goal on that drive, because they were, I believe at that point, they were at the 18 or somewhere between the 18 to 13 yard line of the Miami Dolphins. So they were marching down at that point. But of course, they weren't able to convert, so they had to settle for the field goal. But that was the one that there weren't too many throws that you could really kind of look back at Mac and be like, okay, that's not NFL, or yeah, that's not good, or things of that nature. But that was one of the few throws that where if he makes that, they might get into an opportunity to win. But I mean, really, you can't really put this loss on Mac. This was more on the turnovers that they had, especially with Damian Harris, who I think you can't put him in the doghouse. This is a guy that's going to be a stud for you. I picked him to be a breakout player this year for the Patriots, get over 12 to 1,300 yards overall, and have a great year. But this is a guy that you just kind of have to take the punch there and see how he can come back from it. And so far in all his media availability and Damian Harris, he's handled it well. He said all the right things. He said the Patriot-esque things. And I don't have any fears when it comes to Damian Harris and how he's going to handle the rest of the season. Now, looking at another reason why I think the Patriots ended up losing this game, besides the turnover, right? Of course, that we all focus on the turnover because that happened on the very last drive offensively for the Patriots, and we, like I said, they felt like they were going to punch it in. But as far as besides the turnover, to me, one of the killers on offense was also the penalties. They had dumb penalties all day long. They had that one on Shaq Mason where you're a veteran in this league for a long time. He took back what would have been a 15-yard gain from Kendrick Bourne, who made a nice catch on the sideline, was kind of zipping back up into the middle of the field. And then they had so many calls on the offensive line, some holding, and just dumb penalties. And then you had Matthew Judon on the defensive side, who had that unnecessary roughness play where he went into the bench. And it was just so disappointing for a team coached by Bill Belichick to have that many penalties. So you add the penalties on and that was 5 penalties for 85 yards. And then you tack on the turnovers. That's just a recipe for disaster. So they're lucky that this game ended up being 17-16. And honestly, as far as the Dolphins not taking advantage of it. Now, again, to me, the third leg of this is the defense, who in the middle portions of the game played really well. And I shouldn't really say the middle portions. I should say that they had two bad drives. And that was the opening drive where Miami just sliced and diced them, and you're like, oh, what's going on here? This looks like last year with this defense. Then they settled down, made some good plays, didn't really let Miami get too much going on offense because they only got the 2 touchdowns, and of course the field goal to make it a 17-point game. But they ended up on both the opening drives of the first half and the second half getting the 2 touchdowns. So the Dolphins, I mean the Patriots defense, especially that last drive, when you still have a chance to win. So as much as we bitch and complain about the Damian Harris fumble that cost them the game, you still had an opportunity with about 2 minutes, 40 some odd seconds, 30 some odd seconds. So regardless, you at worst you had 2.5 minutes left to go in that game. Patriots still had all of their timeouts left in the second half. And all you have to do is make one stop, get off the field, and give the ball back to your offense with, well, let's say, I don't know, just if you're able to not give up that first batch of first downs, maybe right at the 2-minute warning or just after at a minute and 30 something seconds, a minute and 40 something seconds. So you still have plenty of time to go down the field and see what Mac Jones and this offense is made of. But of course, the Patriots defense in that last drive, I don't know why in the hell they were playing, the secondary was playing so far off, playing 8 yards off on Devontae Parker, who had made plays all day long, Jalen Waddle, who got one of the Dolphins' touchdowns. And to me, Jalen Waddle, to me, is going to be the best receiver by the end of the year on that team. That's how good I think he's going to be. Devontae Parker, I think, is overrated. He had a breakout year a couple of years ago, and everybody got hyped for him. But he's a good receiver. He's a good, solid receiver. I just don't think he's. I just don't think he's a great receiver. But you're letting Devontae Parker, who went after the Patriots, were able to back the Dolphins up to their own, right near their own end zone when they had when the Dolphins had a penalty called on them, and it was 1st and 14. And on the previous play, you had an 8-yard gain by Parker, but then of course you had the penalty pushing back. So you're like, okay, good. You have a second chance, and then they run almost the same play. Parker gets, I think it was 10 out of it. It was ridiculous. Then the Dolphins end up getting that first down. The Patriots burn their timeouts, and then the Dolphins end up basically taking a knee and winning that game after the 2-minute warning. So that defense they had moments in the game where they made good plays, where Josh Uche looked really good. You had Matthew Judon looked pretty good as well in that game. So I liked what I saw about from the defensive front. To me, it was that secondary at times, though, that was just so frustrating because, yes, I know you're missing Stephon Gilmore, but you still have pieces there with J.C. Jackson. Yes, he's not a number 1. He's a number 2 in my book, but he's still decent enough. And it's just you had Jalen Mills, who is, to me, is going to be one of the most frustrating players on this defense all year long because he'll make plays at times, but then he'll make head-scratching decisions that you're like, where are you? What happens? He'll get beat. So Jalen Mills, to me, should be your third corner, should be a slot corner, maybe play a little bit at safety. Of course, you have to wait till Stephon Gilmore is taken off the PUP list in week 6, but it's just frustrating to sit there and to a unit that's been so good over these last 3 years as far as the secondary. For them, why their game plan was the way it was and why they were not playing up on the line in that last drive was just beyond me. It was just so frustrating. And of course, Devin McCourty, there's some plays that he missed a few, but the safeties to me weren't as much of an issue. It was the corners getting beat late in the game. And just at times the defense, as much as I liked what the defensive front did, there were times where you still need to see more consistent pressure out of them. Now, of course, it's week 1. You still got 16 more games to go, but it was just frustrating just to see the defense not put up that last second stand like we've seen so many times in Patriots history. Now, of course, the Patriots, you have to know that this isn't the same your same Patriots that you saw 10 years ago with all those household names. They have to earn that right to get back what those old Patriots teams had as far as all that respect and the fear that you'd have on the defensive front. So, of course, there are things that you kind of have to weigh there. But still, it was kind of disappointing for that they kind of failed that first test there as far as defensively and not being able to make that one last stop. And I'm not one of those moral victory guys going to sit here and be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's okay, they lost. No, it sucks that they lost. I want them to win. You don't want them to start off 0-1. You want them to win as many as they can. And of course, you know that this is a first-year max, so you're not sure what you're going to get from him. All in all, it looked pretty good, but of course, that was the thing. It's like it's frustrating that they lost. But it was good to see that Mac Jones just might be the guy. And if you're looking at it that way, if you're a Bills fan, if you're a Dolphins fan who took since the 90s, basically, the late 90s, early 2000s when Jim Kelly retired, and then you had Dan Marino retire as 93 or 94. So basically, since I was 5 years old, 6 years old in the middle of the 90s, when all these teams were the cream of the crop, especially the Buffalo, all these teams how many generations of quarterbacks, how many years of quarterbacks did they rifle through? Well, obviously it was Belichick and Brady. And after Brady leaves, you have 1 year of Cam. And then the first crack at it, Belichick looks like he might have found the guy. That made me laugh when I thinking about that the other day. It's just like the Jets. Oh yeah, you got to throw the Jets in there too. All those three franchises. Of course, now it looks like maybe Buffalo might have found their guy, although they did lose this last weekend. So that was that was interesting game to watch. But it's just funny to think that these three franchises were all trying to find quarterbacks along that 20-year stretch while New England was just absolutely dominating the league. And then the Patriots they finally have their nemesis in Brady, their villain, their demon leave town. And what happens? They might have found a new guy that could revamp this Patriots dynasty. We'll see what happens, but man, it was just hilarious to see just kind of some of the reaction out there. Now we'll look forward to week number 2 as they face the New York Jets, who, yeah, they might have got a new quarterback and a new head coach, but they're still the Jets. They still have a god-awful defense. So Zach Wilson last week, to me, he played okay. He got sacked 5 times in that game. He looked at times uncomfortable. Yes, he was able to move out of a pocket, make a nice throw on the move to Corey Davis and got a touchdown out of it. There were moments in that game where you saw flashes from from Zach Wilson, the Jets first round QB, that, okay, this guy could be special, but then there were times where he made plays where oh yeah, that's a Jets quarterback again. Okay, so I listen. I wanted Zach Wilson. I like Zach Wilson coming out. Now I'm not going to go as far as Tony Romo saying he's the next Patrick Mahomes, because I hate those stupid comparisons. Of course, and I might be hypocritical at times. I might sit here and be like, oh, this guy reminds me of this or that. But I'm just saying, when a professional announcer, when a former NFL quarterback, you're sitting there, you haven't even started a game and you're saying, oh yeah, this guy might be the next Patrick Mahomes. He's got that skill set. Now, of course, I know Tony's not that stupid, and Tony's a smart guy. But still, I would have been happy if the Patriots took Zach Wilson, because I think he does have that cannon of an arm. He does make throws from angles that you're like, oh, wow, how did he make that throw? But he's still, to me, he's not as advanced as far as the mental capacity that Mac Jones is at. Now, time will tell how this pans out for the Jets, how this pans out for the Patriots. But it looks like, obviously, Mac Jones playing at Alabama with Nick Saban, who basically is Belichick Jr. down in the college ranks. He got perfect coaching. So I think right from the bat, I think obviously Mac's going to be more successful just because of the situation that Zach Wilson landed in. But it'll be, to me, just because we're early on in Zach Wilson's career, and just for the organization that he plays for, even though, to me, Saleh, I don't think he's a boob like all these other coaches have been, but still, there's just a stink that the Jets put on you. I don't care who you are. Ever since Parcells left the Jets, and then Belichick did his whole resigning it on the napkin of the Jets coach, I resign my position of the HE of the NYJ. I know we have that whole thing. But it said basically that Parcells and one day era of Belichick as the phony coach for a day, basically since Parcells, there's been no good coach down in New York. And they just ever since then, they put a stink on you. Herm Edwards was okay. You had Rex Ryan for a couple of years, was good. It was a defensive coordinator, basically, that had some good success 2 years in 2009, 2011. 2009, 2011, 10, when they went to back-to-back AFC championship games. didn't win them, thank God. But basically at that point, it was kind of that was all that you had was Herm Edwards and Rex Ryan, but none of them really long-term accomplished anything long-term. And it's pretty much when it comes to head coaches for the Jets, they just have an awful stink on them. And I hope that doesn't happen to Saleh, although being a Patriots fan, just watching the Jets struggle is always hilarious. But personally, I like Saleh as a head coaching candidate coming out of the 49ers system there with Kyle Shanahan. He was the defensive coordinator. I was kind of hoping that he went to a different organization so they could have some better success. But I don't think he's a complete boob. But again, that organization just never fails. Things just fall apart with that organization. They haven't won a Super Bowl since 1969 when Joe Namath was the quarterback. And Joe Namath is the worst Hall of Fame quarterback ever. Argue that with me on that one. Come at me, bro. But anyways, this to me, it'll be interesting to see how this goes with a rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. Belichick has a history of just owning rookie quarterbacks and doing pretty well against rookie head coaches as well. So I don't think this is going to be as tight a game as we had last week with the Dolphins. To me, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it'll be more of a comfortable win of a 10-point win, maybe a 13-point win. Anything over that 13 points in my book is going to would be a blowout at that point. So because just at this point, like I said, with Zach Wilson, yeah, he has some talent and he could end up developing into a really good QB for the Jets, but time will tell. But I just think he'll make some stupid mistakes. And it was kind of funny today. They had their press conference, and in a portion of it, he did say that, we know what they're going to run. Yeah. Do you, kid? You're a rookie. And I know you have a rookie head coach, but you think you know what the Patriots are going to run. Good luck. Belichick will pull about 50 million things out of his bag of tricks there on the weekend, and it'll confuse you. And you'll probably end up throwing, I don't know if you'll have as bad a game as Darnold had back in 2019 when they whooped the Jets' ass 33-0. And that was the game that Belichick kept having those penalties, and he kept laughing because he knew just what was happening. And that was one of the few times you actually see Belichick crack a smile on the sidelines during a game. So that was interesting to see as far as looking back at that one. But I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I think you might look at a multi-pick game, two picks, 3 picks for Zach Wilson, or maybe a fumble or a couple turnovers there for Zach Wilson. But I don't think Belichick's will make life uncomfortable for him. I think this will be a week where we see that defensive front with Matthew Judon and Josh Uche, who looked pretty decent against the Miami Dolphins. Uche had a sack. I think we'll see that defensive front really wreak havoc come this week against the Jets. And then if you want to go over to the other side of the ball offensively, the Jets defense stinks. I know we're only into week 1, but they suck. They really do. So I'll be interested to see how this goes for the Patriots, because you have a run game that, yes, they have fumble issues, but I like Damian Harris. And depending on if Belichick keeps Ramondre Stevenson the doghouse for another week, for this week and maybe one more, you might see J.J. Taylor and Brandon Bolden. So you'll see a heavy dose, although I don't know if they'll be able to afford to kind of sit Ramondre at this point. But anyways, you'll have a heavy dose of Damian Harris, who I think he'll want to show that coming out running hard, running pissed off after he fumbled the ball and lost and might have lost his team the game. I think you'll see Harris come in and have a good game. And then just because how bad this Jets defense sucks, I think you'll end up having a game from Mac where he throws for, I'm going to call 315 yards, 3 touchdowns. And like I said, you'll talk on probably 120 plus from Damian Harris. I think this is a game where the Patriots end up winning 28 to 7. So Mac Jones gets 3 of those touchdowns, and you get Damian Harris with another adding in another one there on the ground, in my opinion. So, like I said, I said a 10. I said a 10-point game there, didn't I? So, I think you'll probably see closer to like a 28 to 17 game there. So because I think the Jets will make their plays, but I just think the Patriots, this will feel like one of those games like, oh, you're up by 10, but feels more like you're up by 20 at that point. But I just think this is where Mac Jones, they'll open the book up for him a little bit more. Maybe not full-fledged, just go it and sling it, kid, but I think this is where a defense where, because of how weak they are, I think this is where you'll be able to test out Mac Jones and what he can do. We saw Nelson Aguilar was able to catch, was out there making catches and had 5 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. Jacoby Myers looked solid. And then the 2 tight ends combined for 8 catches. So I think this will also be a big week for those tight ends. I think you'll see Jonnu Smith crack 75 yards receiving. He'll get one of those touchdowns as well. So, and then Hunter Henry will be right behind him there with about 50 yards receiving as well. So I think this is where those tight ends really are going to have a big impact this week, where I think they're going to have over 125 yards combined with the 2 of those tight ends, making a big impact on this game. So, and like I said, I think Mac Jones has showed that he's going to be, you can trust him. He's not going to make, after getting that one big mistake out of his way, fumbling. I think, of course, like I said, he's still a rookie, but I think he's advanced in his rookie stage where you can trust him to go out there and control that offense, operate the offense the way it's supposed to be. And again, with this Jets defense, they just have, they're not good. So this will be a week where you can see what you have out of Max, see what you have out of this offense, and kind of play around, get ready for the Saints, and then the Bucs coming up in week 4, and just try to fine tune some things as well as we move along here. But I think this is a game just where, because of, yes, you can say don't overestimate Zach Wilson, but you just have to look what's on the other side of the ball, and that Jets defense is not good, folks. And now that the Jets they face Carolina, but I just, there's something about Carolina that I just don't trust in that team with Sam Darnold as your quarterback. But you face, in my opinion, a more legitimate NFL team here in the Patriots with Mac Jones. So I think this could teeter into blowout territory, but I don't think I'm willing to go there just yet until I kind of see how things go when they open it up for Mac. But I'm really excited for this game. Yeah, I know it's the Jets, and most of the time you whoop up on the Jets, but I'm excited to see kind of how they open things up for this Patriots offense now that you kind of have a little bit more on the book as far as what Mac can do, and that he really played well. And once again, you're playing the Jets, so you got a good matchup that you have for this team. And now we'll take a quick look here at the Boston Red Sox, as the Red Sox, as we spoke last week, were still in the thick of things. They were, at the time, they had a 3-game lead over the Mariners in the wild card spot, and then the Yankees were a half game up on the Red Sox. But things have kind of changed as the Blue Jays have come storming up the standings, as they are now in first place in the first wild card spot, and their tie. And it's basically, at this point, it's all percentage points and how things have worked out. But the Blue Jays have taken the first spot. Then the Red Sox and Yankees, so those 3 teams are jostling just a half game. And at one point they were tied for that last wild card spot. So things have really started to really get tight here. And it's going to be, and the weird thing is, you could have a situation where you have a playing game for the playing game to face the Tampa Bay Rays. And at this point, it's the Red Sox, Blue Jays, and the Yankees all vying for those wild card spots. So you could have 4 AL East teams that could all, in a span of a playing game to get to the playing game, and whoever wins that faces the Rays. It could be a AL East showdown. that would be crazy, and I'd love to see that. But of course, first and foremost, I'd love to see the Red Sox just clinch one of those wild card spots and not have to worry about it. But they, like I said, they're in a tight race. They won 2 against the Mariners. They tonight have to play the Baltimore Orioles, so hopefully you use that as a good tune-up game against the lowly Orioles, to say it at the least. They're just bad. They're god awful. If the Red Sox beat them tonight, then they're going to have 3 and leave out last year because of the pandemic shortened. But in the last 3 full 162 game seasons, this will be their 3rd 100 loss season in a row for a 162 season. So that's pathetic. They're a bad organization. So the Red Sox have a gift of a series here coming up. And this is where they really have to make hay. And the Yankees now slipped a game out, a half game out after the Red Sox were idle yesterday, traveling back to the East Coast. It was kind of pathetic just to that their Yankees couldn't win against those lowly Orioles. They've had trouble with a bad Baltimore club this year. It's strange, but it's good if you're a Red Sox fan. So now the Red Sox and Blue Jays have those 2 wild card spots at the moment. And it was kind of an up and down, kind of hit or miss series out there in Seattle. At times it wasn't pretty pitching wise. You had Erod who they lost the first game. He struggled in the first couple innings, only gave up 2, came back, pitched really well, made it into 6 innings after he had a high pitch count. They did end up losing that game, but he, like I said, struggled early, but was able to pitch into the 6th inning, get them some length. They ended up losing that game. And then when it looked like they had a win in their pocket in game 2, then the M's come back, tie that one, but then the Red Sox take a 7-2 lead. They took at the time it was 4-2, then they ended up winning 7-2. So they ended up winning that game after Kyle Schwarber came up and cleared a bases loaded situation with a double. And then, of course, on Thursday night, it was Wednesday afternoon, as they had yesterday off. Wednesday afternoon, Kyle Schwarber comes up again in the clutch when it was tied 3-3, almost clears the bases again, and the Red Sox end up winning 9-4. So they in 2 situations where it looked like the Red Sox might blow leads, might blow an opportunity to push a team that's chasing them in the wild card standings below them, they looked like they almost threw it away. But Kyle Schwarber, when they first traded for him, the bat, I was excited for the bat. It was defensively, how is this going to work out? Because he's not a first baseman, even though he's played there. And God, he had a bad play in that Seattle series where it just clanked off his glove. He's a serviceable outfielder, left fielder, but he's nothing to write home about. He's a defensive liability at first. The outfield, so basically you have a DH. But when they traded for him, that was the part that worried me. But to be honest, he's been the best bat that probably got traded because everybody got all hot and bothered about Joey Gallo, but he's going back to being, guess what? Joey Gallo doesn't hit for average, hits a lot of home runs, strikes out a lot. I wouldn't want that. Even though you can hit 45 bombs, you're hitting 190 something just barely above the Mendoza line, striking out a million times. Yeah, I'll pass on Gallo. And then Anthony Rizzo came out hot like a firecracker. Has cooled down a little bit. Has hit 259 since he's been with the Yankees. So it hasn't been great, but it's been serviceable there at first. Although he does have a Gold Glove over there at first. So that I would actually take that. So that part I wouldn't complain because you can hide him down lower in the lineup. But still, at this point, Schwarber has been one of the best bats that got picked up out on the market. So it's been really exciting to see him come up in these clutch situations, and he's performed really, really well. So I really love what I've seen out of Schwarber here over this Mariners series. Save the Red Sox bacon. And then, like I said earlier in the show, you get Chris Sale back tonight. You basically use this Baltimore series as a tune-up. See what happens. And then you get tuned up for the Yankees series that's coming at the end of next week. And that's going to be the big one here. We'll get into a little bit more of that later next week. But Chris Sale, if Chris Sale can pitch in that Yankee series, you can get Evaldi and then maybe Pavetta. I don't know if you want Erod, but however you want to mix and match. But if you can get Sale and Evaldi into that Yankee series, that would be a big boost. And if you can take 2 out of 3, hell, if you could sweep them, that'd be great. But to me, you have to take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees to kind of, at that point, you'd be, because we're at 14, you'd be down to, let's say, 9 to 8 games. And then once you get to that series, because this is the last home stand for the Red Sox, so you'd be down to, I think after that series, it's either 6 or 7 games left on the season at that point. So if you can push them down to be, I don't know, let's say they're 3.5, 4 games with only 7 to go, that's a big margin that they, at that point in the season, you're asking basically the Yankees to win out at that point. So you have to play, you have to take 2 out of 3 of that series from the Yankees, in my opinion, for this to be able to feel comfortable about where you're going to be, because you don't want to lose 2 out of 3. You don't want to get swept. You don't want to be just praying that you're going to be that Toronto cools off and that Yankees cool off and that you miss the playoffs. So to me, you have to take 2 out of 3 from New York in that series minimum. But to me, it's and the other thing has just been defensively, the errors have been killing this team. Yes, they've been able to hit this year, and they've had a good lineup all year long, minus when COVID hit and really took out a lot of their players. But to me, it's been the defense which has killed them. We saw it in that last series at home when Verdugo, the last game before Sale had to leave because of COVID, he ended up having that dropped fly ball, and the Red Sox were up 7-1 at the time, and it was against Tampa at the time, where you would have had an opportunity to take a game against a good Tampa team and probably the best team in the American League. And he drops that ball, and it was just a gut punch at that point. And then you've had other F-ups here as it's gone along. And it's just, to me, again, it comes back to you're playing the guy that shouldn't be playing first in Schwarber. And I know, you can throw anybody over there at first. No, you can't. You cannot throw anybody at first base at the major league level. This is not a men's league. This is not little league. This is not high school. This is not town ball. This is not traveling ball. This is the highest level in the sport in the world. And you have to have a guy over there that has a little bit of athleticism, that has a little bit of knowledge, that has the wherewithal, the instincts to know what's going to do when that happens. And I know we give, and Bobby Dahlback has started to heat up. He's been one of the best bats since August in this lineup. So you can't take him out at first. And honestly, he's been a better option at first base. Is he a Gold Glover? Is he anybody that I would want long-term at first base? Not necessarily, but for what you had now, I'd rather have Bobby Dahlback over there at first base trying to catch those screamers down the first baseline, or those 1-2 hoppers that are coming down the bag. But not that I don't want Schwarber's bat. I want Schwarber's bat in there. It's just you have to juggle that lineup. But to me, it's just once you get Arroyo back, Christian Arroyo, you can slot him in at second base. He's your best defender at second. You put Kike out in center field. Then you try to just decide what you want to do. If you want JD to DH, you want JD in left, where do you want Schwarber? And then is it Hunter Renfroe? Or So you're just juggling. At this point, it just becomes what you're doing in the outfield. Because at this point in the season, saving those runs, because in my opinion, whichever defensive lineup you come out with, you're still going to have a pretty good lineup. I mean, you're going to have Devers in there. You're going to have Bogarts in there. You're going to have a combination of JD and Schwarber and Renfroe and Verdugo. However you mix and match that, that's a really good lineup at the top part of it, all the way down to probably like your 6th, 7th spot. So you're going to be fine offensively. It's just you want to put that best defensive line out there, which to me would be Verdugo, Kike, and Renfroe out and right. To me, that would be your best defensive outfield. And then it's just, okay, what night do we want to put JD? What night do we want to put Schwarber in? Or maybe you could get away with putting JD or Schwarber out in right field and give Verdugo a day off, depending on the lefty matchup that they have going. So to me, along with getting Chris Sale back from the COVID list and shortening up this rotation and making it basically at this point a 4-man with how many games are left, 4-man rotation, maybe give a day off here and there, having shortened up the rotation, getting Sale back, and then playing with your best defensive lineup once Christian Arroyo comes back. That's going to be the key for me to grab enough games to clinch this wild card spot as we head down the stretch. But to me, that's what I'm looking for as we head into next week and head down the stretch for this Red Sox, so that they can hold on to that wild card spot. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll close this out on a fun note here, as I'm sure a lot of you that are listening to my podcast are fantasy football fans, and you play on the regular, albeit a league-long daily fantasy, dynasty, keeper leagues. So I'm sure you're all into that. And what I want to do to try to help you out this week, as far as I know, a lot of people go the starts of the week, the waiver wire pickups and things to help you from that nature. But another thing that you kind of have to look at here, which I think some people kind of do not ignore, but one of the things that's at times take a back seat because maybe they're a name, maybe it's you're looking at, well, this is the only option that I have. Well, this is the week where I'm going to get into the start of the stays, the stay away of the week, just back away. The hell to the no, not going to stop this guy of the week. That's that type of situation. So we're gonna get into the stayaways of the week. Now, when it comes to quarterback, now this is a guy that I personally have. Now, luckily, I have Tom Brady as my starter. But so I'm lucky enough to have him on my bench, so I will have him sitting. But if you're in a league where a deeper league, if you're in a 12-man, hell, even a 14-man league, 14-team league, I'm in a 10-man league where I have Tannehill as my backup. To me, at quarterback, it's Ryan Tannehill. And that's just because, to me, there's just been some things swirling around with that Tennessee team where going into the season, they were a fantasy darling. You had Derrick Henry, who's still, that's a guy that you start every day. But you also have that receiving core of AJ Brown and Julio Jones, who I know it was only 1 week, but it just seemed like after that week 1 debacle against the Cardinals, where they got blown out, and then Julio Jones punched a guy, and then, of course, Mike Vrabel comes out and is none too happy. It just seems like things are dysfunctional down there right now. Now, I think Vrabel's a guy that will eventually get it under control, but I think for this week, right now, they're playing against Seattle on the road. So Ryan Tannehill is a guy that I would say, if you have another option, if you have a guy maybe, like if you're looking at a Jameis Winston, for instance, because the Saints are playing Carolina, which to me, defensively, to me, Carolina is a middle of the road defense. So I think you could get a decent return for Jameis Winston, or depending on what else you can find out on the waiver wire. I just think this week there might be some better options in the quarterback situation. But I just there right now there seems a little bit too much dysfunction with Ryan Tannehill to trust him. Now, you might get an individual good performance from one of the receivers, but I just think overall, I just don't and my bet would probably be A.J. Brown. If you're going to take one of those receivers, do A.J. Brown. But I just would stay away from Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback in fantasy this week. Now, if we head over to running back, at running back, the guy that I would stay away from at this point this week would be James Robinson. Now, James Robinson was the fantasy darling of all last season after he was the undrafted rookie free agent, won the starting job in Jacksonville, and then he was an undrafted free agent in fantasy football. He comes in and is one of the best stories that we've seen a while in fantasy. And of course, what did the Jacksonville Jaguars do? They draft Travis Etienne. Then he gets injured for the year. So, of course, he becomes the starting running back. Now, I still have faith if you're in a season-long league to stick with James Robinson. But again, remember, this is for week 2. This isn't for a whole season long. In week 2, the Jacksonville Jaguars have to face Denver. In Denver last week, held Saquon Barkley. Yes, and I know Saquon Barkley is coming off an injury, an ACL injury, but still, that's Saquon Barkley. So I would stay away from Saquon Barkley as it is. I mean, I'm sorry, not Saquon Barkley, but I would stay away from James Robinson right now just because that Denver defense did a pretty good job against Saquon, and they have a veteran defensive front that I think can play well against the run. So if you have another option out there on your bench, let's say if you have maybe a Damian Harris, or if you're lucky enough that you were able to stash a Darrell Henderson with the Rams, or depending on what you have out on your bench, maybe if you have a Miles Sanders, because if you're kind of flip-flopping back and forth between a Miles Sanders, James Robinson, if you're in that debate, stick with, I would go Miles Sanders. Or if you're looking for like a play off your bench, maybe a Kareem Hunt. If you had Kareem Hunt as like your flex or you're on your bench, maybe slot him into your RB2 and find something else that you could stick in that flex spot. But I just wouldn't. To me, James Robinson facing Denver, I just don't like that matchup for James Robinson this week. So I would stay away from James Robinson and find a different option. And for me, the wide receiver stay away of the week for me, that I'm not going to touch it, the week is going to be Marquez Callaway for the New Orleans Saints. And to me, everybody got so hot and bothered about Marquez Callaway in the offseason because obviously Michael Thomas is on the PUP list. He won't be back for a while until week 6. So everybody had to find the top target in New Orleans. And of course, last week, Jameis Winston throws for 5 touchdowns, but what everybody didn't see was that he spread those touchdowns around and he only threw for 178 yards on the day. And the New Orleans Saints are facing Carolina. And I don't, if you draft a Marquez Callaway thinking if you're in a 3 receiver league, if you have to start 3 receivers or you have a flex spot, and I think a lot of people are going to get overhyped about what Jameis did last week. We threw for 5 touchdowns. I have to get some of those Saints players in there. I just would stay away from Marquez Callaway because there's just something I think Jameis Winston is going to have. He could alternate in between weeks for me like he has in the past. I mean, maybe things could change because you're into a new team, a new coaching staff with Sean Payton now as the head coach, as his head coach. Jameis Winston. But to me, I just would stay away from those receiving options, especially Marquez Callaway. If you took him thinking he's going to be the number one or at worst a number two, once you get back a Mike Thomas, I would fade Marquez Callaway. To me, I just stay away from that situation. I don't feel good about that at all as we head into week number 2 in fantasy. And then as we head over to the tight end slot, to me, the tight end slot, what I would say for tight ends is I would, even though Gronk went off last week, I know everybody's probably going to be hot on Gronk right now. Whoa, he's the lead tight end down in Tampa, and Tampa's got this explosive offense. But I think this could also be one of those situations where you could see Gronk kind of go up and down as far as his production goes over the week, because there's a lot of mouths to feed down in Tampa. You got Antonio Brown, who went off last week. You had Chris Godwin, who had a really good game, had over 100 yards on the touchdown. And you still have Mike Jones. You still have Mike Evans, who had a couple catches. Wasn't anything to write home about, but remember, he's a guy that's had 7 straight years of 1,000 plus yards. He's been one of the best receivers in the league. He is another one of those guys that you have to feed. So I think this is a game where you might see more where it alternates to where Antonio Brown still has a good game, and then this might be a Mike Evans game and maybe a Cameron Brate type of game. But I don't think Gronk is going to have an awful game where you're like, oh man, this guy, he got 2 points for me. He only had 2 receptions. I think this might be more of Gronk gets 4 to 5 receptions for maybe 40 yards and no touchdown this week. So this might be a week where you might, if you have a different option like Robert Tonyan that you could go to, because I think this is where Green Bay gets back on track. So Robert Tonyan could catch a couple touchdowns here for the Packers if you're able to stream him, or if you have him on your bench, and then sit Gronk. Because there's just something that tells me this week where Brady has a lot of mouths to feed, and he could be looking in a different situation and stay away from Gronk. So those are my stay away, don't touch it for the week for week number 2. As always, every week we'll try to get you some fantasy advice. We'll look in a few different directions as far as start, sits, don't touch, the gotta have it of the week. We'll always try to help you out and try to help you earn some money if you're in those daily fantasy leagues or what have it. So I am really looking forward to next week to see how Mac Jones and the Patriots offense executes against this Jets porous defense, and then see how maybe that defense can rebound as well. And of course, we'll always keep an eye on the Boston Red Sox and see how that wild card race, how that unfolds. And of course, we'll break down week number 3 versus the Saints for the Patriots matchup. And of course, if anything else breaks during that time, we will be right on top of it here at New England Sports Weekly. And always remember to follow the podcast, hit that like and subscribe on YouTube, because the shows will be up there after the live stream as well. So you can always watch it there. And of course, it's available on Spotify and SoundCloud under New England Sports Weekly. So search it by name there, and you'll be and subscribe to the show, like it there as well on both Spotify and SoundCloud. Follow the show's Twitter account at NE Sports Weekly. Send me any of your questions, tweets, whatever you want. I'll take any responses, especially if you have any fantasy advice that you're looking for. Take a look there, and we will help you out. And always follow me at Sean_Met28, and I'll have you covered. But I've been Sean Metcalf for this week, and I will hope to see you on Wednesday evening. Everybody have a good night.